Magical Hack is a pretty bad card that's nonetheless pretty interesting. Magical Hack is an instant or interrupt that lets you change the text of any card being played or already in play by replacing one basic land type with another. As an example, you can change Swamp Walk to Planeswalk. This is a pretty cool concept, because it naturally begs the question, what the fuck do I do with this card? And how do I take advantage of this? And the short answer is, you probably don't. This type of card is not really competitive and suffers from consistency issues because it doesn't do anything on its own, so like, at best you're going to need two cards or your opponent to play ball. Basically, this card does so little on its own, unless the environment is tuned specifically to make this effect valuable, it just likely won't be. Now, the most obvious way to use this is to deal with land walking cards, right? As the example would indicate. Like, if your opponent has a Bog Wraith and uses Evil Presence to turn one of your lands into a swamp, so the Bog Wraith is basically unblockable, you can Magical Hack the Bog Wraith to instead give it Mountain Walk if you don't have any mountains. Like, that's not what I would call good, but it is kind of interesting. This is the kind of card that's so nebulous that it kind of makes you feel like a pretentious nerd when you make it work. How very smart of you. Magical Hack and cards similar to it, like the color changing cards or other word changing cards, are really interesting and have a sort of pull on me, since it's such a unique way of solving a problem, and as people that enjoy solving the puzzles that Magic presents us, this can be appealing. Seriously though, these kind of cards held an almost mythical pull on me as they begged me to solve them the first time I ever saw stuff like this. And there are solutions to this kind of thing. And like all jank Magic cards, the answer is usually cube, or cube adjacent. We're in cube adjacent this time. Dandan, as an example, is a really interesting format where both players draw from the same, mostly blue, deck. One of the major points of Dandan is that the only damage source in the deck is, well, Dandan. Dandan is a creature from Arabian Nights that is a 4/1 for 2 mana. It can't attack unless defending player controls an island, and if you don't control an island, Dandan is sacrificed. Now, these days this card is laughably bad, and it's niche enough that even during the time it wasn't really that good, but a 4/1 for 2 mana is absolutely insanely strong by the time. The downside is hard to work around, but Dandan was pretty powerful. You probably had better options, even in 93, but if you told me you popped a couple of these in the sideboard for when you faced another blue deck, I wouldn't think that was stupid. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into the Dandan format, as there are so many creators already talking about it. I will say it was originally called Forgetful Fish, and was created by Nick Floyd in like 96 or 97, so it's been around. And full disclosure, I have not looked at every Dandan list in existence. I checked out 2 before writing this script and didn't even look all that close, but I didn't see Magical Hack in either of them. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Magical Hack in some of these lists because it's actually an interesting and useful card in this type of game. Crystal Spray is a very similar card that costs 3 mana and also draws you a card, and that I did see in at least one of the Dandan lists. Now, it might seem like we're getting really off topic, and we are, but the point of this whole Dandan aside is that you can Magical Hack your opponent's Dandan to say something like Swamp instead of Island. And since the list you're playing, and you both are using the same list, doesn't have any swamps, that means the Dandan is instantly sacrificed. That's pretty damn cool, and very interesting way to make less powerful or less generically good cards powerful in their own way. Hell, Magical Hack might even be too strong in this environment, which is really funny to think about. You can also Magical Hack an Acid Rain if you're feeling like a douche, which is really funny, but you do need to have 2 very specific cards to make that work, so keep that in mind. All this to say that Magical Hack and cards like it are pretty interesting, but they aren't what you would call strong. I don't think that's really a negative, though. I think it's kind of inspiring to see cards like this carve out specific niches in specific variants or formats and finding some level of value. There are a lot of cards in Magic. And a lot of them are expensive or rare or otherwise just outside the reach of anyone that's reasonably responsible with their money and doesn't have too much of it. And as a mostly history channel, I do tend to talk about a lot of expensive cards, but you can play Magic with any pile of cards and have a great time. In fact, it's often when delving into the niche or strange cards that aren't widely desired that you find the most fun. I really like cards like Magical Hack and Dandan, and I think it's important to remember that you can customize Magic and play however you want to play with the cards that you want to play. It just takes one other person who's willing to play the same way as you. Or, I guess you could even find a way to play Magic with one player. I'm almost positive that some nerd has figured out a way to make a Magic game one player. I'm sure you could find that on the internet really easily. I'm not gonna Google it for this video though. I don't care. The point is that you don't have to play with any specific cards. Just play something different. It's all fun, all of it. I guess I don't really have anything else to say about the mechanics of a card like Magical Hack. Despite this card being compelling and interesting, it's not really that deep. So we'll go over the art and call this video done. There are only two arts to talk about here. The original art is by Julie Barrow, and it's okay. This might be my least favorite original art I've talked about, but I certainly don't hate it. It doesn't evoke emotions of mysticism or anything like that, but I also don't hate it. It's just an illustration of some massive nerd, and that's what the card is about, so I think it does a fantastic job in that sense, I suppose. The line work is good, and the style is really cool. Feels like something you would see at like an 80s D&D convention or something. I like it, but I don't have much to say about it. So let's talk about how you can prove with my own video that I don't know shit about Dandan. This card has been under the radar for like 30 years, but it recently got reprinted in the Dandan Secret Lair. Because of course, WotC needs to capitalize on everything, and once Twitter started talking about Dandan, they figured it was as good a time as any to sell nostalgia to you. Pretty based, I guess, but it would have been cool if they at least credited the dude who made the variant in the first place. They kind of just took his idea, slapped a secret layer on it, and called it free money. I actually don't know if what they did there is something that I think is ethical or not, because, like, it is their intellectual property. So it's a gray area that I really don't want to comment on too much, lest I be a hypocrite. But yeah, they secret layered this thing. Anyway, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Secret Layer Magical Hack was illustrated by Samuli Bandini, and the art is fucking banger. This is super fantastic and hilarious. I really like the deer just at the bottom of the body of water, just being like really fucking confused. And yeah, I think the art on this and the rest of the Dandan Secret Layer is really cool. I actually prefer this art to the original, as it actually attempts to showcase what's going on instead of just a picture of some nerd doing nerd things. Do keep in mind though that it has been stated in a few places that the art direction was like super loosey-goosey in the early days, and you know, you can also assume that just by looking at the art. And Julie Barrow might not have even known what the card's effect was going to be. So I don't mean to criticize the original art when I say that the Secret Layer is cool for doing what the card does, because they obviously knew what the fucking card did. Okay, yeah, fuck it. That's all I really have to say about this. As always, I enjoy the discourse in the comments, so if you have any thoughts on Magical Hack, or even Dandan, or how WotC does things, I guess, or even fucking Thought Lace, let everyone know by explaining them in the comments, if you want to. Different perspectives are pretty fucking cool, you know? But that's all I have for you today. You can like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you give a shit, but either way, I hope you have a magical day. Thanks for watching.